Hi again and welcome to this video. For this one, just as in my last two videos actually, I'll cover running macOS Sonoma in a virtual machine. The difference here is that this time we will be doing that on a Windows PC. As you will see, this does bring some additional steps as I want to do this without the need for Apple hardware at all or the need for an installation image built by someone else. So, in short, in this video, I'll show you how to get macOS Sonoma up and running in a virtual machine on Windows, starting from scratch. Running macOS in a virtual machine is pretty straightforward when doing this on a Mac that is running macOS already, as it's easy to get your hands on the installation files. Unfortunately, this is not the case when you want to do this on an x86-based Windows machine. Running macOS in a virtual machine allows you to experiment and play around with different versions of macOS itself without the need for real Apple hardware. It also allows you to have an environment to troubleshoot and diagnose issues with that real Mac hardware when you no longer have a working macOS-based machine available, for example, to do a fresh installation after you install the new drive. There are several ways to get to a working macOS VM on top of Windows. The two most popular hypervisors to accomplish the task are VirtualBox or VMware Workstation, which is now free for personal use. I gave both of these a try, but found VMware Workstation to be a lot easier and more stable once you go to newer macOS versions. As I mentioned, my goal here was to not use any pre-made macOS installation media that required Apple hardware. The downside of this is that the process is quite a bit longer and requires more data to be downloaded. The good thing is that this has no further dependencies and should work for new releases as well. I'll do the steps in the video on my Dell Optiplex 7060. It's equipped with a Core i7-8700T and 16GB of memory. This should be more than sufficient, and a bit lower specifications should most likely work fine as well. Since macOS 11, Big Sur, Apple changed the format in which they distribute the recovery and installation images. With that new format, it became a lot harder to extract the required data and create bootable media from Windows, at least without the need for paid tools. To work around that, I'm going for an intermediate installation with macOS Catalina, which we will then upgrade further to Sonoma. First, we need to get our hands on the recovery image of Catalina. For that, we'll make use of a script called git macOS. This script will allow you to easily download software packages directly from Apple. The journey starts with downloading the git macOS script from GitHub. You can find a link to this in the description, and if you prefer to have all the steps written out nicely, I also created a guide on my blog for which you can also find a link there as well. So, after navigating to the GitHub page, we can just download the whole repository by clicking on Code, Download zip. Once downloaded, navigate to your Downloads folder, right-click on the zip file and choose Extract All. For convenience, I'll move that extracted folder from here, called git macOS master, to the desktop. This will make it a bit easier to create the commands later, but it's not required if you know what you're doing. Now we can open the git macOS master folder on the desktop and just run git macOS.bat from here. This will start git macOS, and the script will first check if we have Python 3 installed on our system. If it's not, like in my case, just type Y to get it installed. As you can see, this will download and install Python 3 completely automatically. Eventually, the script will also download the latest catalog from the Apple servers and present you with a list of available releases. From this list, we just need to choose a number that suits our needs. As mentioned, we need macOS Catalina, so just search for the latest version of Catalina in this list. In my case, and this most likely won't change anymore, this was 10.15.7, 19H15, which has the number 10 in my list. So, in order to download that item, we simply need to enter the number 10 and press Enter. This will start to download the required files from Apple servers. Now, for our goal, we only need a single file called basesystem.dmg. So if you have limited data or simply do not want to wait, you can skip all other files by pressing Ctrl+C for each of them when they are downloading. For example, with the file install_esd_dmg.pkg, which is now downloading and is several gigabytes in size, we can do this. This file, as I mentioned, basesystem.dmg, is the only one we actually need, and we definitely shouldn't skip that one. Let me cancel this one as well. So here we are. If all went well, you should end up with something like this. As you can see, I skipped both install_esd_dmg and recovery HD meta DMG since we don't need these, and the only file we need, basesystem.dmg is here. The downloaded files are now saved in a subdirectory called macOS downloads of that git macOS master folder on the desktop. For convenience, again, I'll rename basesystem.dmg to catalina-basesystem.dmg and move this to the desktop as well. The DMG file which we downloaded cannot be directly used on a virtual machine to boot into macOS recovery. So the next step in all of this now is to convert it to a VMDK file. VMDK stands for Virtual Machine Disk Format, and as the name basically explains, this is something a virtual machine can use. To convert to this format, we need QEMU for Windows. So let's download and install that first. Again, you can find a link for that in the description or on my blog. On this link, choose to download the latest version. And once downloaded, run through the installer. After QEMU is installed, we can open a command prompt and navigate to the desktop or the other location where you put that Catalina basesystem.dmg file. Then enter the full path to the QEMU-img tool with the following arguments. This command will call the QEMU-img tool and ask to convert the Catalina-basesystem.dmg file which we have on the desktop to a VMDK file called catalina-installer.vmdk. If all goes well, you should now end up with that catalina-installer.vmdk file on the desktop. At this point, we have a bootable recovery image that is usable by a virtual machine. So now it's time to download and install VMware Workstation from Broadcom, which recently acquired VMware. Again, you can find the link which you need for this in the description. Before you'll be able to proceed to the download, unfortunately, you will need to log in with a Broadcom account. If you do not have a Broadcom account yet, you'll need to create one. If you would have one already, you can just proceed to the next chapter and proceed with the download. To register instead, click on the login button top right and then click on register. Go through the steps here by first entering the code sent to your email address, followed by your details. If all goes well, you should end up as follows. Once you have an account and successfully registered, reopen the link which I provided and log in when asked. In the selection you get presented with, choose for VMware Workstation Pro 17.0 for personal use on Windows and click on the latest release that is available. On the next page, first agree to the terms and conditions, then click the download button right from the software in the list. It could be that this requires providing some additional personal details as mentioned here on the screen. Complete this form and click Submit at the bottom of that page. And finally, you'll be allowed to click on the Cloud button right from the software in the list and start the download. Once the file is completely downloaded, simply double-click on the installer and run through the setup. At the end of the installer, just click Finish and we can move to the next step. As Apple does not allow running macOS on non-Apple hardware, VMware built in some soft restrictions in Workstation that would prevent you from doing so. While technically, the tool is perfectly able to run macOS in a virtual machine, as you will see. So, before we can get our macOS Catalina VM up and running, we will first need to remove those restrictions. To do so, we'll use another script or tool for which, once more, you can find a link in the description. So, navigate to the link provided and go to the latest release on the right side of the GitHub page. Then download that release. And once downloaded, go to your Downloads folder again, open the downloaded zip file, and run the unlocker executable from there. In here, all we need to do is to click on Patch and wait a bit. If all goes well, you should get something like this. Alright, finally we are here and ready to create our first macOS VM in VMware Workstation. Let's start VMware Workstation for the first time and when asked, select Use VMware Workstation 17 for personal use. Then click Continue. In VMware Workstation, click on Create New Virtual Machine. Choose for Typical in the first step, and choose to install the operating system later. When choosing the guest operating system, select Apple macOS X and set the version to macOS 10.15. This matches with that Catalina recovery image which we downloaded earlier. Give the virtual machine a name I chose for macOS, and optionally change the location of the VM. For the disk capacity, increase the size to 100 GB. Then, in the Ready to Create Virtual Machine step, simply click Finish. Once the VM is created, let's change a few things by clicking on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. Here we will increase some of the resources available to the VM and link that Catalina installer.vmdk file to the virtual machine as well. So let's first increase the memory to 8 GB, and then we can also increase the CPU core count to 4. Of course, the values you would want to put here depend a bit on how much resources you have on your host machine and what your purpose is with the VM. As you can see, currently the VM has that 100 GB virtual drive which we asked for while creating it. As mentioned already, we also need to link the Catalina-installer.vmdk, which we have on the desktop, to this virtual machine. This will be the virtual drive from which we will run recovery to install Catalina on that 100 GB virtual drive in the first time we're booting the VM. Click on Add on the bottom of the dialog and choose for hard disk. Leave the disk type as SATA, click Next, choose to use an existing virtual disk, and in the next step, navigate to the Catalina installer.vmdk file which we have on the desktop. Click Finish and choose to keep the existing format in case you get asked if you want to convert this virtual disk. Our VM is almost ready now, but there are a few tweaks which we still need to do by editing the configuration file or VMX file of that VM. You can find the path to this file in the virtual machine details on the bottom of the window. To navigate to the directory, we can simply right-click on the virtual machine's name in the left menu and choose for Open VM Directory. In the Open Directory, we need to find the VMX file. For this, if you don't display file extensions, you can look at the type, which should be VMware Virtual Machine Configuration. Right-click on that file and open it with Notepad. I've also opened a second file with the changes we need to do, and I'll put both side by side. Right is the VMX file or configuration file of our virtual machine. Left contains the required changes. The contents of that left file can also be found on my blog if you plan to go through this. The first two variables on the left already exist in the VMX file, and we just need to change them to the matching value. So the first one needs to be changed to false, and Ethernet 0.virtualDev needs to be changed to VMXNet3. For the rest of the entries, starting with board ID, we can just add them to the end of the file. This will expose the virtual machine as if it would be a MacBook Pro 15,1. You can play around with these values if desired, just make sure that the board ID and hardware model match. You can find a full list of these entries on Mr. Macintosh's site if you would like to go into this. Once you made all the required changes, save the file and then close it. Finally, we can start the virtual machine which we just created and edited by clicking on Power on this virtual machine. As I left the CD/DVD drive connected here and my PC doesn't have a physical drive, I'm still getting this warning, so I'll choose to not connect it for now. After this, the virtual machine will boot up for the first time, and as you can see, if all goes well, we should see an Apple logo with a progress bar. And after a bit of patience, the virtual machine should end up in macOS recovery for Catalina. From here on, this will behave exactly the same as it would be on real hardware. The first thing which we will need to do is to format that virtual disk of 100 GB, which we added during VM creation. So start by going to Disk Utility first. In Disk Utility, make sure to show all devices in the view menu on the left first. And now you will see two virtual drives on the left side. The currently selected one of 2 GB is our Catalina-installer.vmdk from which we booted now, and we want to leave this unchanged. The first one in the list represents that 100 GB virtual drive, which is where we want macOS Catalina to be installed on. So make sure that first drive is selected in the list and double check it's roughly 100 GB in size. Then choose Erase on top of the window, give the disk a name, leave the format and scheme as is proposed and click Erase to format the new virtual drive. Once the process is complete, we can close this utility and continue with the Reinstall macOS option from the main menu in Recovery. Click Continue, then agree to the licensing terms, and here select the virtual disk which we just initialized in Disk Utility and click Install. From here on, it's a good time to grab a cup of coffee as you will need to wait for some time. This will download and install all the necessary files for macOS Catalina on the newly formatted virtual disk. In my case, this took roughly 30 minutes in total. If all goes well here, you'll be presented with the Welcome Wizard. Again, this would be exactly the same on physical hardware. Just click through these steps, create a user account, and choose the options which you would like to enable or disable. Eventually, you should get to see your newly created macOS instance running Catalina. As you can see here in About This Mac, because of the changes we made to that VMX file of the VM, macOS thinks it's actually running on a MacBook Pro. At this point, you can use this virtual machine as any other macOS instance that would be running Catalina. And if your goal is just to play around with macOS, or you need macOS to run some specific software or tools, you can go ahead and stop here already. But for this video though, our goal is to run the latest version of macOS, Sonoma. So we will continue with the next step and upgrade to Sonoma. Since we now have a working macOS instance, as mentioned in the beginning, since Apple changed the way they distribute their OS packages for newer versions, we're now able to use this instance to download the installer for Sonoma. The easiest way to get that installer is through the App Store. So let's start by launching that one. In the App Store, we can simply search for macOS Sonoma here and click on View. Then download the installer by clicking Get on the next page. Confirm that you want to start the download, and once more, you'll have to be patient, as the Catalina VM will now need to download and extract about 14 GB of data. For me, this took about 30 minutes again. Once the download is complete and the files got extracted, the installer for macOS Sonoma will automatically start on your Catalina VM. At this point, it might not be a bad idea to clone the virtual machine or take a snapshot. In case something would go wrong with the upgrade, that will allow you to restart from this point and you will not need to redo or re-download everything. That's exactly what I did, and after the restart, I noticed that macOS started in dark mode. Nice. So, once you're ready to upgrade now, click Continue on the installer. Agree again to the license agreement. Confirm you want to continue. Enter your password, and from here you can grab another cup of coffee, as this again takes quite some time. For me, it took more or less another 35 minutes on the hardware that I have. But if all goes well here, you eventually get asked to log in again and see your macOS instance that is now upgraded to macOS Sonoma. Let's take a quick look at About This Mac to confirm that. Right, at this point, the virtual machine can be used as if it would be a real Mac. But to make things even better, let's go through a few more steps to improve the experience. As you probably will notice quite quickly, the virtual machine's resolution is limited to 1024 by 768. And although that's not completely unusable, we can improve it by installing the VMware tools for macOS on this VM. As a bonus, this will also improve performance and enable some additional features like shared folders between the Windows host and macOS Sonoma guest VM. Let's start by shutting down the virtual machine properly. Since we forced VMware Workstation to support macOS using Auto Unlocker, it's not possible to automatically download the VMware tools for macOS, unfortunately. Instead, we'll need to manually download the ISO file from the Broadcom download site. Once more, I provided a link for this in the description or on my blog that will bring you there. If requested, log in again using that Broadcom account which you created at the beginning. And then on the download page for VMware Tools, choose for VMware Tools 11, as at the time I created this video, there were no macOS downloads for version 12. Then choose for the latest version available. On the next page, agree to the terms and conditions and download the VMware Tools packages for macOS in zip format. Once downloaded, go to your Downloads folder, right-click on the downloaded file and choose Extract All. In the VM Tools folder, we can find the file we need called darwin.iso. So now that we have that ISO file with the tools, we'll need to mount it to our Sonoma VM, but let's also unlink the catalina-installer.vmdk since we no longer need it there. Go again to Edit Virtual Machine Settings. As you can see, the VM still has that 100 GB drive, which now has Sonoma installed, and also still the 2 GB recover image for Catalina, which we used to boot up the first time. Select this virtual hard drive in the list, double check that is the correct file and size, and click Remove. You can keep the VMDK file if you like to create another virtual machine in the future, but you can also delete the file together with catalina-basesystem.dmg and even the git macOS folder if you're short on space, as your macOS VM doesn't need any of those anymore. After that, let's map the virtual CD DVD drive to the ISO file called darwin.iso, which contains the VMware tools. So go to CD DVD drive, choose Use ISO image file, and browse to the downloaded darwin.iso from our Downloads folder, and make sure that the Connect at Power On checkbox is checked. Click OK to close the VM settings and power on the virtual machine. From macOS now, you should see the VMware Tools icon on the desktop. Open this and click Launch Install VMware Tools. Let's run through this installer. Enter your user's password and click Allow for the installer to make changes to the VM. If you get a notification regarding system extensions that are blocked, click Open System Settings and allow the extension from VMware, as this is exactly what we want to have. System settings might ask you to reboot the virtual machine, but choose Not Now here instead. And even though I allowed the system extension, in my case the installer from VMware Tools still failed. In that case, just rerun the install VMware Tools and the second time you should end up like this. So now let's continue and choose to restart the virtual machine. After the reboot, the VMware tools should be installed and they are running in the background. At this point, we're also good to eject the ISO which we have mounted in that virtual CD DVD drive. Having the VMware tools installed will allow us to finally change that fixed resolution which we had in the virtual machine till now. You can't do this by using system preferences, but instead we can simply change the size of the window in VMware Workstation by dragging out one of the corners. The VMware tools will then take care of changing the resolution to fit with the size of the window. As you can see, this leads to strange and non-standard resolutions that might cause compatibility issues with certain software. In case you want to set a standard resolution or you just want to specify exact numbers, open a terminal window and run the following. You can change the 1280 and 800 in the command at the end to the horizontal and vertical resolution of your preference. From here on, you can comfortably work with a virtual machine already. Let's look into something else that makes things even more convenient: shared folders. And although this is an optional step, it can be very handy if you want to share data and files between the guest and host machine, which probably you will need. To do so, let's enable this feature and choose which folders to share. Click on VM in the menu bar of VMware Workstation and choose Settings. Go to the Options tab, Shared Folders, and select Always Enabled. Then click the Add button, and in the wizard, select a folder to share with the virtual machine. I created a new folder on the desktop called Share for this, but any existing folder with or without files should do fine as well. Finish the rest of the wizard, and then back in macOS, perform a reboot to enable file sharing and have access to the shared folders. After the reboot, you can access the shared folders in Finder by going to Go, Computer. The new item called VMware Shared Folders can be found here now, so let's open it. In here, you'll find all the folders that you have added when changing the VM settings earlier. In my case, that's the new folder on the desktop, which is called Share. Any files that you put in here, either from the Windows host or from the macOS VM, will be accessible on both sides. For example, if I create a text file and save it in this folder, we can just instantly open the same file on the Windows host. As a VM doesn't have 3D acceleration, you might have noticed it has trouble displaying the dynamic Sonoma wallpaper. As I downloaded and copied a static one to the shared folder on Windows, I can now also use that without any issues on the macOS VM. As you can see, this makes it very convenient to exchange files back and forth. That was it for the video. From here, you can go ahead and play around with the virtual machine as if you would be working on a real Mac. If you want some more flexibility, you can also easily take snapshots of the virtual machine and return back to them when you break things, or simply clone the virtual machine to have a second or third instance. That was all I have. Hope you have liked it, and if you did, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let me know how this goes for you, or if you have any questions in the comments. Thanks again, and hope to see you back here soon.